Welcome to another AI Wisdom podcast with Howie Xu. Howie is an AI and data executive, a Stanford guest lecturer. He also posts on these topics. And yesterday, his Twitter post on OpenAI got 650K views. And apparently, it's top of Google when you Google GPT-5. So, impressive guy altogether, has a huge background. Howie, can you tell me a bit more about yourself, your background, and what you're up to nowadays?
Sure, Charles. Happy New Year to you and everyone first. Very happy to be here. So my background, I've been an infrastructure, software, operating system type of guys for 20 some years. I was one of the early guys at VMware, helped VMware to build a networking stack from scratch. And I've been doing software-defined network, the security, in the last few years, I started a AI security company myself, acquired by Zscaler, and then I moved down to Palo Alto Network later on. And of course, 2024 is going to be an exciting year for me and then for everyone in the industry because, a lot of new things, right? Whether GPT-5 is coming or other things, the generative AI is like every day you wake up, there's something exciting, there's something new. So I can't wait to see through the entire year at this point.
Do you feel that the current version of AI, let's call it ChatGPT's algorithm, do you think it can scale to AGI, or will we need a modification and a different approach to AI to reach AGI?
Well, depending on your definition of AGI, right? I actually wrote up something about a year ago, probably March-ish last year, right? Really depending on your definition of AGI. If your definition of AGI is, read a paper, learn it, maybe even read an image and then learn it, arguably we are already, there. And then maybe already there, way past that, right? Of course, most people, majority people have not said, hey, we have reached AGI. But for those people who said we haven't, reached AGI, what's their definition? And I'm pretty sure we all have different definitions. So that's number one. Technically, there are different views, and there's no standard view to begin with. So it's going to be a very interesting milestone for all of us to chase because none of us have the same measurement to begin with. And then there is also business, non-technical agenda behind that. I'm not saying it's an evil agenda. I'm just saying that people have different agendas. Some people wanted to call it the AGI sooner. Some people wanted to call it the AGI later. If you look at an OpenAI, investment agreement or whatnot from Microsoft, there is, if you read through, there is actually implications. When OpenAI declares its AGI, what sort of things Microsoft can continue to use it or not use it. So when you mingle all those things together, right, technically we're not on the same page, right? You ask any expert, they have, 5 different opinions already, let alone you have, thousands of experts on the planet. And then you have commercial business agenda, mixed together. So I think it's a mess. But it's a beautiful mess. It's a beautiful mess because, anyone and everyone can articulate a version of it. Now, having said all of that, coming back to your question, right? Your question is really, is the transformer architecture, right? Scaling law going to, get to help us to get to the, maybe majority of people are thinking about AGI. I tend to think yes. I don't think I can articulate, here's the 1, 2, 3, 5 reasons because, even, I mean, let's be honest, right? The GPT-3, GPT-4 has been working beautifully, but no expert is able to explain, why, right? So how am I going to say, hey, before I see the results, this is going to be there. It takes some belief. It takes some conviction. I do have the conviction that a transformer model and then scaling law is going to take us to the next level. When I say next level, I meant, at a minimum, order of magnitude better than GPT-4, if not even more than that, right? So I think GPT, 5, potentially 6, we are going to get there via the current architecture, more or less. And then, with the scaling law, that's sort of how I think about it.
In other fields of science, is it common to make discoveries and not understanding how we got there?
That's a very good question. I would say yes and a no. So we are very sure, we're very accustomed to, hey, we need the physics, we need the chemistry, and then we sort of need, sure, that's where you're coming from, right? But do we humans even understand how we learn things, how we kind of learn things from a baby, grow up, how we, how everything work internally? No, but you and I are talking, right? Just because I cannot explain how my brain works, I can't say whatever I say is wrong or right, by itself, right? So yeah, I think, it's different. It's very different. It's a very big paradigm shift, how we think about this, right? Now, I'm a software guy. I'm a technology guy for decades. I was talking to a friend even yesterday. The way we think about, there are so many things that's a paradigm shift, but even like a software engineering, software testing, software QA, it's a paradigm shift, right? In the last several decades, right? You build a piece of software, you have a QA plan, this is right or wrong. But with generative AI, with co-pilots, what is right and what is wrong, right? How do you even know this is right? Who has the authority to say this is right or wrong? And what do you mean by right? Is that like not having this hallucination, or giving you helpful information, helping you to resolve the information, right? What is the right, right? So I think it's a very big paradigm shift. So we need to think the world very differently in this generative AI, in this AI, the new era.
For many, what Sam Altman has orchestrated is nothing short of a miracle. To me, it seems he reunited a bunch of geniuses in one room, gave them unlimited resources. Do you think this model is reproducible? Do you think this is eventually what will lead to great breakthroughs in the AI field and in other scientific fields?
Your question is whether the similar model can be used in other fields.
Right, because you founded various startups yourself, right? Some were really, really successful, reached billions of dollars. Is the formula for breakthroughs, business or scientific, is it to reunite a bunch of smart people and give them unlimited resources?
I think my take on this is, in theory, yes. In practice, it's hard because, in theory, when you have this level of the talent concentration, right? And then people, have a long-term view, right? Ilya, right? He has a very long-term view. He has his own conviction. He was doing Transformer, he has been doing Transformer, the large language model, big models, before there was a result. And then even when people laughed at him, laughed at the methodology, right? GPT-2 was being laughed at it big time by the industry, by the academics. And he continued that path, right? So when you have people like them, not everyone is going to work out, but that's a model that's going to, that's what it takes to get some breakthrough. So I think in theory, yes. In practice, it's going to be difficult because, when you look back, OpenAI's success, right? It's not just Ilya has the conviction, but also the real talent concentration around him, right? It's not just one person. The amount of the money, right? I think it takes a lot to tango in this case. And I think in practice, it's going to be hard to replicate. So that's number one. Number two, however, I do think this OpenAI, ChatGPT, generative AI, whatever you want to sort of categorize it, is going to help lots of the breakthrough in other fields anyways. the reason is finally we have, I like the way that Satya of Microsoft, the CEO of the Microsoft, put it, right? He looks at the programming capability, programmers' resource as the digital currency. In other fields, in the past, we lacked the digital currencies, right? Because we don't have enough money, we don't have enough budget, we don't have enough talents. But now with the GPT, with the AI, with the help, we have far more digital currencies now. With additional digital currencies, 10x, potentially 100x more than we had before, breakthrough could happen. So I would rather think a breakthrough would happen because of AI, not necessarily because there are equivalent of the Ilya people sort of being replicated in other fields. That's sort of how I think about it.
But then it seems that or humanity is somewhat limiting this progress, as we've seen with the board coup at OpenAI. Isn't that indicative of how us humans are capable of building great things, but in the end, ego is bringing us back? How could that endanger the future of AI and even impact humanity by building an AGI that is much too human and capable of destruction?
Yeah, I mean, you touched a very fundamental thing, right? One is AI technology, the other one is human ego. Whenever there are enough humans, there will be enough egos, right? Uh, this is a technology related podcast. I'm not going to sort of get out of the bound, but ultimately you are absolutely right, right? The defining variable may not be the technology for humans. Actually, it's the human itself, and human ourselves, and then ego, right? How much ego is surfaced being played out, maybe the high order bit. And you look at a political world, you look at things globally, you look at a technology world, you look at why certain companies, certain administration, at a certain management team doing super good job or super bad job or whatnot, right? If there's a one word to capture why, ultimately it's the one word that you just said, right? Ego. And, unfortunately, maybe fortunate because we are all humans, right? That is the high order bit in the end. Everything else may be the distant second. So you brought up a very interesting point. I don't have a good answer, but the reality is there's a technology front. How do we leverage it to the best we can? In the best case, it's a wonderful, wonderful progress, beautiful progress. At the same time, this beautiful progress, right? GPT-4, GPT-5, can be used in a way that's not safe, unintended, right? And then could have better consequence. Am I concerned? Sure. But this is no different from other games we have think through for decades or hundreds of years or thousands of years that, ultimately we have this crisis, we have those, less beautiful things because of the, humans have ego. Very, very interesting point.
Listen to the pod between Bill Gates and Sam Altman yesterday, and it seems that Sam sees the use cases of GPT first to programming, second healthcare, and third education. Um, where would you see the best use cases of AI, the most appliables, and potentially the ones that could also get the most venture capital behind them?
Yeah, I think he's, by the way, I didn't listen to that talk yet. It sounds like a, good talk, right? Programming, healthcare, education, those are the verticals that the technology can be applied. Makes a lot of sense to me. In particular, I'm looking forward to the disruption that AI is going to bring to the table in the AI, in the education field, because education is one area that has not been disrupted much And we all know that, when our next generation, uh, comes to the society, comes to the workplace, it's a totally different ones. And how is the education going to prepare them for that? I'm actually, very much looking forward to seeing what's going to happen and hopefully make some contribution to that too. So that's the sort of the three verticals you just mentioned. It makes a lot of sense. I think from the horizontal technology point of view, um, most of the energy of the generative AI has been focusing on question and answers, basically, right? Hey, I give you a lot of documents, you give me the answer, I, fetch the most relevant chunk or the paragraphs, and then the large language model is going to formulate beautiful answers based on that chunk, or based on some, sort of some memory it has already. That's sort of what I've seen in the last 1 year or so. I think this is still going to be played out because, even though in theory we have the fine tuning, the RAG, all those technologies, but it still takes time for that to really work, to really shine and then work in the optimal way. So we're not there yet, but I think it will take another year or two. I think there is one space that's kind of a wide space today is more than just question and answers, but deeper reasoning, deeper analysis of the information, right? Not just finding the interesting chunk and then I formulated the answer, but also correlate lots of different parts of the information and then make sense out of it. And then, if this information is just within the context window, it might be easier because ChatGPT may already be able to do that, but maybe not because, there's all sorts of problems like lost in the middle or that kind of things. But forget about that. But what if you have gobbles of data that's way beyond the context window? Can we leverage the AI to make sense out of the data? I think there is a lot of the interesting problem to be conquered here.
And you have a son that's currently studying at a lot smart young man there. What would be the application to supercharge his learning, make sure he's motivated and make sure he's accomplishing and executing the work to be ready for this hard job market that's awaiting him?
I wasn't ready to talk about my son, but since you asked, yes, I do have a son. Um, um, uh, a grade school student. He's still, right? He's very much into AI, actually. He actually wrote a chatbot for his school so that the pinpoint is it's so hard for people to find the calendar, lunch menu. So hey, one natural language way you get to sort of know what's the lunch for tomorrow. It turned out to be more painful than people realized to find the lunch menu. So he's very excited about this. And what's going to happen to him and his generation? Um, I don't know the answer, but I was talking to some of the AI experts, in the last few months. One guy said something that's, I think, very interesting because we had a roundtable discussion about the impact of AI for career, right? That was the, thesis of that roundtable. And then we had a lots of interesting conversation towards the very end. One gentleman rose up and then said, "Hey, listening to all of the conversations, and it sounds like in the future, we're not going to have software engineer one, software engineer two, senior software engineer, those titles anymore. What we are going to have is a problem solver problem solver one, senior problem solver, principal problem solver." I said, bingo, that is where the direct, future is. I think we still need a problem solver. We still need the people who sort of have the judgment, right? But do we need a software engineer as we understood in the last 20 years, in the next 20 years? May not be, right? With all the AI stuff, no one is a programmer anymore, and everyone is a programmer, right? With the low code and no code. Of course, there's always exceptions. Someone is going to build OpenAI, someone is going to build operating system kernel. That's a small exception. Vast majority of us in the society, do we need to write Java, Python, 15 years from now? Maybe not. However, everyone becoming a programmer because once we specify things, it will be codified. Now, does that mean we don't need people or people with good judgment? No, I mean, probably even more, right? Because, if nothing else, we have more noise in the world. And whoever who can pick the signal out of the noise is going to, be in a better spot. So I would say, I would agree with that gentleman's, basically at the end of that roundtable, his question became a summary in my view. Is his question is, are we going to have software engineer one to senior software engineer, or we are just going to have problem solver one, problem solver two, and a senior problem solver? And I think that's where the industry is going. So for my own sort of the advice to my son and then my the generation of my son is that be prepared to be a problem solver more than anything else.
Love that. Pain fixer. Love how, yeah, you phrased that. And he's already looking for product market fit at such a young age. This is quite inspiring. Where can we find out more information about you, Howie?
About me? I'm on Twitter and then, on LinkedIn and, and then you can find my son's chatbot, pantherai.com as well. So, so I think it's, yep. Um, Great to chat with you.
My pleasure. That was Howie Xu and Charles Cormier for another Wisdom Podcast.